was almost 50 years ago, when the NDP under David Lewis worked with Lester B. Pearson. Actually, it hasn't happened recently, so people see a minority parliament, such as the ones we've had recently where Stephen Harper had a minority. Well, no one wanted to work across party lines with him of the opposition parties, but the mistake, that was a tragic mistake and a miscalculation, and putting partisanship above concern for the country or the planet, was that the NDP and the Liberals were so unwilling to work with each other that they let Stephen Harper form government at all in a minority. And that's the biggest reason why you need Greens in this election, is that we're almost certain to have a minority parliament. None of the big three parties is going to be able to form a majority parliament. They don't have the seats, the votes, or the support as things stand now. And that's not just, I wouldn't read much into a poll shift of a point here or there, up or down over a couple weeks. But this is over the last more than a year that the Conservative vote is going way down. The NDP vote has come up, the Liberal vote has come up, but the three of them are bobbing around in minority territory. And it doesn't, they're on the dynamic of really studying the individual ridings, looking at how Quebec is likely to break out, what's going on in the prairies, what's happening in the Maritimes. You start looking at it riding by riding, it's still a minority parliament. So what stops the stupidity of hyper-partisanship of the Liberals and the NDP not being willing to work together, preventing Stephen Harper from forming a minority parliament? There's only one ingredient in that parliament that makes sure that does not happen, and that's Green MPs, because we won't let it happen. As much, and it's part of this fear factor voting thing that obscures the thought process. And that's what's wrong with doing anything out of fear, is you don't think clearly. You're right behind you. Oh, you want to add
one thing to that. I don't think a lot, and this is something maybe that often these people on the phone who don't question our ability to govern. I think people really underestimate the quality of the Canadian civil service, who have been under attack for many years.
Yes.
And I think when we get this change in government that we all so very much want, and re-empower our Canadian civil servants, that's the key. As candidates, our job is to listen to you and reflect your issues back into caucus and then direct the civil service. So, government, you're not electing me to be, to make up all the rules and do all the research and write all the legislation, right? Our job is to be a representative in Ottawa. And I really think the most important quality is common sense and good listening.
And respecting independent civil service advice, right?
Yeah, C24 is my concern. What are your thoughts on C24? It doesn't get much mainstream, but it's kind of also important for me being a new citizen.
Yeah, in terms of two-tiered citizenship.
Pretty much,
yes.
Like, super French, but piss off the guy, piss off the Prime Minister, or piss off the party, and then, get your citizen revoked, right?
Yeah, I just wrote, I have an article that should be online fairly soon about this, because one of the trends under Stephen Harper has been to create some fairly dodgy ideas about some things that used to be quite stable and secure, such as citizenship. It didn't used to be that a naturalized Canadian citizen was less Canadian than someone born here. That's never been the case. We've never had two-tiered Canadian citizenship. The first law that they passed that created, it may not have been the first, but one of the first, last fall's omnibus budget bill included the FATCA, the Foreign Accounts Tax Compliance Act, which essentially says that anyone with a U.S. connection is subjected to different treatment by their government. That if they were, well, this is not about the voting. This is about banks are now required to go through all the records of Canadians and look for anything that's called a U.S. connection. So if they have a home in Arizona, but they're Canadian citizens, but they go down to Arizona, they have a U.S. bank account there, or they had a parent born in the U.S. and this is in their files. All of their tax information is then handed to the CRA. All of their financial private information is given to CRA without their knowledge, and the CRA then gives it to the U.S. IRS. Now this is clearly unconstitutional. It violates the Constitution that requires that all Canadian citizens be treated the same. Then we've had new rules recently that, and of course C24 you talk about, that say that they can strip someone of citizenship if they're convicted of a terrorist offense. Now, I don't think it's directed at, well, I think it's exactly directed at someone like Maher Arar. It's directed at someone, they'd like to say, okay, we get this person out of the country, and this also ties into C-51. The no-fly list provisions in C-51, I think, are not intended for the public relations purpose described during its passage, which was, oh, we don't want young people leaving Canada on planes to go join ISIS. As was evident when the RCMP arrested young people in Montreal about to join a plane to fly to join ISIS. That happened before C-51 became law, so they obviously didn't need it to arrest people there. But if you take these pieces together of this group of Canadians are less Canadian than others, if they happen to be overseas visiting from where they came before, we can strip them of their citizenship, prevent them from getting on a flight back home to Canada, and under Part 1 of C-51, we can turn over all the information we have about that person to a foreign government. And that person is in a hellhole beyond hellholes, and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms doesn't apply to them anymore because we strip them of their citizenship. So I think it's but again, treating Canadian citizens one type as different than another type, and making it, they've made it much harder to become a Canadian citizen. They've increased the costs of applications. They've made it, immigration and refugee law has also been really quite trashed. But I do think that all the things that Stephen Harper has done in the last 4 years to wreck environmental laws, wreck criminal justice laws, wreck our access to good statistics. Personally, I didn't think we'd ever have a prime minister who was against statistics. We have to fix every single thing, including muddying the waters around what citizenship means. It's quite core to who we are to understand that once you are a citizen of Canada, you are a citizen of Canada. It's not a mutable concept. It shouldn't be open to political banishment. And we have to change these after the election. And since you asked one question, but that you're hot on the trail, so I'll go to you next.
I just want to know, so if the Green Party gets a significant amount of seats, you would have some power. Will you ask to repeal Bill C-51?
Oh, I won't ask to repeal it, I'll demand it. I'll chain myself to any prime minister and not allow him to do a single thing before repealing C-51. It is the kind of, it is legislation that simply does not belong in a democracy. It does nothing. I mean, I'm glad you raised it. Let me just say this clearly. I've studied all 5 parts of it. It's an omnibus bill. There is nothing in it to save. It's not as though there's some good provisions and some bad provisions. And I was the first MP to say it had to be repealed. It took a while, and I'm really pleased that Tom Mulcair came to agree with me. And I hope that after the election, the Liberals will agree it has to be repealed. They certainly will have to do that if they want our support on anything. This Bill C-51, in the words of, well, John Major was a Supreme Court judge, a real one, not like the one Harper's just appointed. And after his time in the Supreme Court of Canada, he headed the inquiry into the Area India disaster. And he testified to the Public Safety Committee that the way the bill was drafted, because there is no requirement at all that any of the spy police agencies talk to each other. None. And there is no oversight over their activities. None. And what he said is, it's human nature. He said it's not a matter of if someday CSIS has information that they should give the RCMP and they might not. He said, I can tell you now, it's human nature, they won't. And he said that's why this legislation should not be passed unless there is at least a national security advisor to the Prime Minister with the ability to ensure that, and there's a lot more than just CSIS. There's CSIS, the RCMP, Canada Border Services, as well as CSAC. And now CSIS is being empowered to break laws and run amok overseas. I don't know how many of you saw the article by Paul Heinbecker and another prominent former Canadian diplomat who said, what happens to our international reputation when our embassies are trying to collect information, and RCMP investigations also happen internationally, and we've now unleashed CSIS agents to run amok. They have permission under C-51 to break the laws of other countries without asking anybody permission or telling anyone in Canada that they're doing it. So another piece of very important evidence came not until we got to the Senate, because they pushed C-51 through the House so fast, we didn't get a lot of the witnesses that we really wanted to hear. But an extraordinary guy who's actually an MI6 agent from the UK, he's one of these spies who came in from the cold kind of guys. His name is Joe Fogarty. He testified before the Senate. He's been on liaison work to Canada. And he said they've asked him in the UK, is there anything that Canada is doing against terrorism that we should replicate in the UK? Are you seeing anything there that we want to do? And he said, I'm afraid to have to tell you that I told my colleagues in the UK there's absolutely nothing that Canada is doing that should be duplicated in the UK. He said, Canada is sitting on a disaster waiting to happen. It's not legislation that makes us safer. While Stephen Harper is going to tell us in this election that we're going to be more secure because of his steady hand, that's in the case of anti-terrorism legislation, he has made us less safe. We know he's made us less safe if you need to get the Coast Guard in Vancouver. We know he's made us less safe if you happen to be trying to put out wildfires caused by climate change when he thinks that our fires are his photo op. We know he's made us less safe in lots of ways, but Anti-Terrorism Act, so-called C-51, makes us less safe while also removing our civil liberties. Yeah.
How do you feel about other parties, particularly the Liberals, trying to suddenly hijack the climate agenda, make it their own? At least on the surface, if you dig deeper, you can see that, it's not the same platform by any means as our own. And what should we do about it?
Well, I would be delighted, and in fact I was delighted in 2008 when Stéphane Dion actually took part of our platform. I lamented that he couldn't explain it properly, but it was I'm not trying to hog the climate agenda, right? It's too important.
But how about in a riding where there's this concern about vote splitting? And
well, I tell you, the Liberal climate plan is pathetic.
I know.
The NDP climate plan is non-existent. The Conservative climate plan is dangerous. So I would be very happy if, I was very disappointed actually, because I thought this is about a razzle-dazzle. We're hearing about the Liberal climate plan, it's about to be announced. And it so misunderstands the nature of the issue that the current plan apparently is, we will go to Paris, and when that meeting's over, we'll figure out our plans.
Rather than go to Paris with a plan,
You can't.
which is what you need to do when you turn up the table.
You can't go to an international negotiation to make a speech and figure out what your position is later. And actually, Mulcair says exactly the same thing.
But do you think the average person recognizes that?
No, because
How do we get
nobody
that
talks
message
about
out?
carbon or climate at all. I mean, I'm hoping that this debate next week, because one segment of the Maclean's debate is on energy and environment, and I'm hopeful that after that, people will say, well, that was an interesting debate. Maybe we should have more debates that have all the leaders in them. I would never criticize, and it's hard for us because we have a policy of carbon fee and dividend. Now, and we don't think that cap and trade is the way to go. But when Ontario and Quebec jointly announced a cap and trade program in conjunction with the state of California, I was unwilling to dump on it because I knew they were trying to do at least something, right? And I'm disappointed by how basically non-existent what the Liberals announced on climate was. On the other hand, we need to work together, particularly after the election. I'm not going to, I hope, in the course of this election campaign, I'm not going to be, it's not going to be, I will never criticize anyone personally anyway. I won't say anything mean about Justin Trudeau or Tom Mulcair or even Stephen Harper that would make it hard to work with them later. But I absolutely reject the idea that we have to be the only party that has a climate plan. I wish they'd take more of our policies and ideas.
And you know what, I was going to say, the climate narrative, in a way I've sort of let go a little bit here in North Vancouver because I was focusing so much on jobs and the economy. And I'm going to sort of start to talk more about the environment because it's clearly in my skill set. The biggest problem I have with the other parties' plans is they expect this cobbling together of plans provincially. This is a kind of subject that you need federal leadership on. You need somebody at the top saying, this is the way we're going. As we've mentioned, the Green Party platform says we're going to go carbon free and dividend. On a bureaucratic level alone, it is the most simple way of administering something like this. Carbon fees have already worked in BC, plus you get dividend checks back, directly back to the people that are paying carbon fees. So you see that money come back. It's revenue neutral, as they say. The other issue that I have with some of the other parties, and I'm going to be very careful here, some of the other parties with what they're saying is they are nervous about introducing a carbon fee, and yet the Calgary Petroleum Club last month, the leader of Suncor Syncrude got up and said, we need a carbon fee because without it there is uncertainty in our industry, and uncertainty hinders business more than certainty. So my attitude is, and again this is where I talk, let's work with people, get a carbon fee going, let's go up to the guys at the oil sands. They're going to come in with a carbon fee that's ridiculously low, we're going to come in that's high, we're going to meet at the middle ground. We will build certainty into an industry that at the moment we cannot let falter, but then we, whether they like it or not, have caused them to put it on, to administer our plan, and we move forward. And this is what I love about the Green Party, is that sensibility. We know what we have to do. So yeah, I'm harping on, but this is something I've got to start building that narrative back again. We've got to start owning it, because it is our backbone.
And I think it's important to expose the hypocrisy of the other parties. So a climate strategy doesn't include increasing investments in fossil fuels that are increase our greenhouse gas emissions. Like, it's completely hypocritical. You know, Voltaire's got a cap and trade program, and yet he's in favor of Energy East, and silent on Kinder Morgan. He won't be able to oppose LNG in BC because the provincial Liberal NDP are in favor of it. Justin Trudeau, he loves LNG, he loves various pipelines. So again, they're speaking out of both sides of their mouths, and sadly, not enough Canadians understand that. You know, the solution isn't just to have a carbon policy, or however late it comes, but you actually have to have principles about how we move off of last century's economy and into the new economy, investing in renewables, which is 6 to 8 times the job creation per dollar. The Green Party is going to start to phase out subsidies to the fossil fuel sector, let renewables, compete on a level playing field at least. If we can't do things like feed-in tariffs, and there's some debate about whether subsidies, but the renewable sector says we don't need subsidies, just give us a level playing field. So the Green Party will phase out those subsidies of fossil fuels, and we are not in favor of any investments that are going to deepen our commitment to increase greenhouse gases.
And I just want to add to that, as a member of obviously living on the North Shore, and all of us live on the North Shore, in Penn Riding or Lynn's Riding, or in North Vancouver, because you're our grassroots, you are our ambassadors, you are how we're going to get people to understand it's so important they vote green. Talk to people of any political stripe. Ask them how much skiing they did this winter. Ask them if their grass is brown this summer. Like, bring it to the forefront so that people start to realise this is happening not on a sort of a level that we don't have to talk about or feel. It's right here, right in front of us, right on our doorstep. It's so important that we own that discussion and get people to think about it on a political level, because sadly, whether we like it or not, environmental science is now political, and damn it, it has to be our argument. Okay, so,
yeah. So, yes. Yes.
I don't know what the polls are today, but shortly after Harper was giving the money, all that money to kids, he shot ahead.
Now it's going down again. It was going to be a momentary blip, the Christmas in July feature brought to us by Santa Pierre. I think it's very funny. Pierre Poilievre. I mean, they actually went to the trouble and the expense of making those checks be hard copy paper checks, even for people who usually get online deposits. It was so transparently political, and right before an election. The Canadians are smarter than that, and it was shown in the most recent round. The last poll I saw from ECOS was the NDP are up again, then the Conservatives, then the Liberals. So that they're bouncing around, the three of them, and we're bouncing around, depending on the poll, we're somewhere between 6 and 7. I wish we were higher, obviously, but when you take that across the country, in BC we're running much stronger than that, and in individual ridings, of course, bear in mind, I was elected last time in Sandwich Gulf Islands when all the media projections were the Greens wouldn't win any seats. This time around, they're saying, well, you might win 1 or 2. Well, we're going to win a whole lot more than that, and then they'll be surprised. But I pay attention to polls for long-term trends. But in this case, I know so many conservatives who are so unhappy with Stephen Harper. And some of them include the cabinet members who are not running again. I mean, if Stephen Harper was in a good position getting ready for this election, or people are really terrified that someone's going to form government again, you know, ask them to consider what Peter MacKay was thinking, and what John Baird was thinking, and what James Moore was thinking, and what Christian Parody. There were a lot of cabinet members who, quite at the last minute, decided to bail. And there are well over 30 Conservative MPs not running for re-election this time. And what's interesting too, when I talked at the very beginning about how we have recruited such extraordinary candidates to the Green Party, I can't think of one of them. I've heard the rumor of one candidate in Quebec, whose name I don't remember. The Conservatives have not recruited anybody. There's no fresh new renewal to the party. They're not unveiling, look at this great Canadian who's now decided to run for us. Remember how they used to, for Peter Kent, he was at one point one of their exciting celebrity candidates. He got his turn in cabinet, got to have his reputation trashed by doing what Stephen Harper wanted him to do on the environment and on climate, and then was cast aside and is no longer even in cabinet. But they haven't refreshed their front bench, whereas we are, gosh, we have an awesome group of brand new candidates who've never been in politics before and who really are going to do a great job. I mean, I don't think we need to worry about Stephen Harper suddenly getting a surge of support. They've pulled out, they've thrown all the money they can at it. Once they drop the writ, they can't make any more spending announcements on behalf of the government of Canada. So there are hands all over the place. You go then, because you have great news.
One of the climate-driven issues has become very political is movement of populations in the form of refugees. How does the Green Party recommend that we deal with all the world refugees?
Well, did everyone hear the question? No. Okay. The creation of environmental refugees due to the climate crisis has been anticipated for decades, and it is happening. And some experts who are looking at the current Syrian crisis and the civil war and the rise of ISIS have linked that to climate change in that region. I was just looking at I was looking from the Washington Post today online. The temperature in one community in, Baghdad has gotten hit levels of temperature that are 50 degrees Celsius. And there's one community that has reached, with incorporating a humidex index, it's gone to, I think, 74 degrees Celsius. Environmental refugees from areas that are suffering from extreme persistent drought, environmental refugees dealing with areas where they can no longer live because of rising sea levels, storm surges, and there are regions of the world that have had to evacuate islands within certain nation states. So the Green Party globally passed a resolution to say that we expand our concept of refugees to include environmental refugees. And although many Greens around the world are resistant to increasing immigration levels because of wanting to maintain a footprint within the country, so Greens have always been in Canada in favor of immigration to Canada because on a completely different basis we want to make sure that we have a healthy, diverse population and lots of people to do the work as the demographic in Canada ages and fertility rates decline. But in the question of environmental refugees, we need to recognize that we're going to need to open our borders to many more people. And we need to act quickly on the climate crisis, aggressively on the climate crisis, so the levels of climate variability and extreme weather events that we're about to experience can be held at levels to which we can adapt. It's a key concept. It's not a political objective that we avoid global average temperature increase of 2 degrees Celsius. And that's a target that Stephen Harper adopted himself in Copenhagen. Personally, he was there. 2 degrees Celsius is not a political objective. Avoiding 2 degrees is a survival imperative. And that's going to mean that we can avoid we will avoid the worst case scenarios of climate change, which will include doing things to adjust to environmental refugees and find ways for them to return to their communities, avoiding massive disruptions. Because it's also can very easily lead to geopolitical conflict and violence. We have to really understand, when Barack Obama said recently, I don't know how much coverage it got in Canada, that climate change was a larger security threat than terrorism. That's absolutely true. And
Maybe driving it.
what's it? Yeah. And then we'll go there and
So we're all up here.
Okay,
Just
okay.
running out of time.
Already, okay.
It's my impression that the Senate is screwed up.
Really? We've only got 10 minutes.
The Senate of Canada is, of course, comes up in all my town hall meetings. The Senate of Canada cannot be substantially reformed or abolished without opening up the Constitution and going through a process that includes, to abolish the Senate, you need every single province to agree. And it's very clear some provinces will. Now, it happens that one of the new recruits to the Green Party, Deborah Coyne, is a constitutional law expert who advised the government of Newfoundland and Labrador through the Charlottetown Accord. She thinks we need to actually amend the amending formula by going to national referenda as a way of dealing with something as substantial as what we do about the Senate. What Stephen Harper just promised, by the way, I will no longer appoint senators, is unconstitutional. Small problem with that little political strategy. Of course, he promised it before, by the way, in 2008, and by the fall of 2008, appointed 18 senators on one day, including some of his more celebrity senators, Mike Duffy, Pamela Wallin, Patrick Brazeau. He really knows how to pick them. So the Green Party policy based on a vote of our membership is that the Senate should be elected by proportional representation. That's the case in Australia. But even to do that takes opening up the Constitution. So the Senate, in a lot of ways, makes a perfect political football issue for any party. Because you can kick it up and down the field all you want, and everybody wants to take a kick at the Senate. But fixing it, there are no quick fixes. I'd much rather focus, just to underscore, getting rid of first past the post, getting rid of the Prime Minister's office, restoring parliamentary democracy. None of these things require opening up the Constitution. They can be fixed in the House of Commons and easily.
Rebuilding the Senate chamber is not relevant.
Rebuilding the Senate chamber, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, last question.
It's sort of off the point of it, but last year, every beach except Tate's Park was polluted, E. coli. And that said something to me about the environment and what we're doing with our water. It also extends to pollution from plastic or whatever. I wonder what your policy on that.
We have to, that goes back to the environment message.
Yes.
And even I was watching the news this morning, and I was unaware of the fact that as sea surface temperatures are rising, especially this year, but overall, we've got two massive areas of very warm water that we're sort of sandwiched between, one of which is actually sliding down of all places from the Aleutians. It's even hotter than the warm time of is El Nino right now. Needless to say, the waters are very, very warm, and in fact, there was a warning issued on the morning news to say that we should be wary right now of shellfish because there's a certain bacteria that survives the warm water and is doing really well. I eat oysters, or used to eat oysters frequently, so I can't now, so it really affects me. This all goes back to a climate issue. We can't control the water temperatures. We can't say, okay, we're going to start cooling those down. But what we can control are the effects of climate change, and pollution is tied into that as well. Again, just in the news recently, and I was horrified to find this, that the microbeads that are in many facial products and whatever are small enough such that filtration systems don't catch them, the fish think that they're food, and they end up back in the food chain. And it all goes back to environmental concerns that haven't been addressed. DFO has been slashed, along with many of our scientists, our public service scientists, and it goes back to the fundamental understanding of the data and actually taking that data, the evidence we call it, bringing it back into the debate, making a reasoned decision as you go forward. So I guess my answer is, what is our plan? Bring data back into the debate and start making smart choices. This is, I can't have oysters now. Again, it's come back to me, our house, our home. This is where I really feel that the environment is so...
But you can have public.
Can I mention another thing about oysters? Because on Vancouver Island, and this is a really, it's such a critical climate issue, and it doesn't get discussed enough, and that's ocean acidification. Because carbon dioxide in the atmosphere not only warms the atmosphere globally and disrupts climate systems, even if you were to have it, William Dyer and I've had this argument a few times because he thinks we should distribute sulfites in the upper atmosphere to keep us cooler here so that even though we have global warming, it won't be so. But that does nothing about this other phenomenon that CO2 in the atmosphere mixes in the water and it creates carbonic acid, which in theory, over time, we know for sure, would create, well, basically melt the shells of life forms in the ocean. What's frightening for me is that it's already started enough on Vancouver Island that shellfish producers on Vancouver Island have moved their seeding operations to Hawaii. Because in context of ocean acidification, the effect is amplified in colder waters. So I've talked to some of the scientists from Norway and Denmark as well. They're doing a lot of work in their northern regions where ocean acidification is also a factor. So for the very, very small seeding of the shells, they've had to move those operations to Hawaii, then bring them back to grow on Vancouver Island. So ocean acidification is one of those sleeper issues. There is not a single program right now in the government of Canada to measure ocean acidification on our coasts to see what's going on. There's some local measurements, like there are some being done right now by the Institute for Ocean Sciences in my riding, but there was a shellfish collapse off the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, and I asked to find out what were the ocean acidification readings there. They don't take them. There's no national program to look at ocean acidification. So I know I said it would be the last question, I should shut up about these, but in the 4 years that Stephen Harper has had a majority in which he could put through bills that were really dangerous and slash more than he had before, we're now at a point where the chickens are coming home to roost. Wheels are falling off various processes that people used to understand. People are beginning to realize there are no DFO fisheries habitat officers to show up when you call someone for help. There is no one left to deal with a derelict vessel when it's on shore and no one at Transport Canada can afford to send someone to deal with it. There is no one to go when there's an oil spill in English Bay a few meters from shore and the Coast Guard facility has been closed down and Environment Canada's Environmental Emergency Office has been closed down. There are now, it's not just a speculative matter of we needed those services of our government and we imagine there might be problems if we don't properly inspect the meat.
Yeah.
There are at issue after issue after issue. The chickens have come home to roost from slashing and burning services that we need as citizens, and we have every right to expect that our government is going to provide. So I'm grateful to you all for coming. I hope we have your support for Claire.
Yes, thank you very much.